Hey everyone, how are we doing? So, has anyone got one of those things that really pisses them off? That every time it happens, you like pull that face where you go like that. So I'm going to talk to you about my pet peeve today. As someone that's spoken to lots of property investors over the years, this is something that comes up quite a lot. As been said, I'm Sam Norris. I'm the owner and director of Grand Union Finance, and we are the best property finance company in the country, which is a direct quote from my mum. Obviously that's true. But joking aside, over the last 18 years, I've spent a lot of time helping property investors with their finances, and over the last 5 years since I started Grand Union, we've helped hundreds, if not thousands, of property investors, just like yourselves, with their mortgages, with their bridging finance, development finance, and commercial mortgages as well. And when I generally get on the phone, I still have the privilege and the pleasure of speaking to most of the clients that come through the gates at Grand Union Finance, the newbies, before they get allocated to brokers and the team help them out. I always get on the phone with them and I start with one thing, which they're not expecting. They're usually expecting me to go through a load of paperwork with them, because that's what finance is all about, isn't it? But I start with the question, what does your property business look like when it's finished? And that usually takes them by surprise. But there's a really good reason that I ask that question, is because it really it allows me to understand where they are now and where they're trying to end up. And whether that is they've got a business, they've got an important job, that's their main focus, and property is just on the side, or whether they want to go for world domination, I need to know where that kind of lies. And so today, I'm going to take that view, and I'm going to do a bit of a rich dad, poor dad scenario, tell you about two different clients that we've worked with over the years. One that had a particular mindset and one that have the other. And I'm hoping that you're going to leave with one mindset over the other. And as you'll see, this is all about how fear kills deals, and more importantly, how the fear of interest rates kills deals. So I'm going to start with client number one. Now, we're talking of world domination. One of the things that sticks in my head about this particular client is that when we first got talking to each other, this is probably going on about 8 to 10 years ago now, he on the title of his emails in block capitals, it said, "Make me the UK's biggest property investor." So, mediocre kind of ambitions there. And this was back in the days before Zoom, where you went and sat down with your clients, you went and met with them. So he had an office in North London, went over to see him. He was big in e-commerce. He had built his business through e-commerce. And I'm quite a clumsy person, which is why I was really worried about stepping up on there and making a fool of myself earlier on. I got to his office, little office space, and this place was like a modern-day Aladdin's cave. Floor to ceiling, anything you can possibly think of, from supplements to electricals, and how I meandered my way through that without falling flat on my face is beyond me. But eventually I got in front of him, and he's sitting there behind his big desk, grand chair, and again he reiterates this ambition. He wants to be the UK's biggest property investor. And 10 odd years ago, I'm not the broker I am today. I didn't have as big a client bank. I was quite impressed with this. I was thinking, brilliant, this is going to make me a bit of dollar. And I got very excited about it. Now, not only was he quite successful in e-commerce and in business, but he actually had been running a very successful property sourcing business up in Manchester as well. So that just added to my excitement. This guy has got a track record. He's up there, he's finding BRR projects, before BRR was kind of a thing, up in Manchester, yields of 7, 8, 9, 10% on buy-to-let properties. You don't even get that anymore. And he was... and he obviously done the e-commerce, and then he built the sourcing business on top of that. Very much took one model and made it work with the other. So the third piece of this incredible puzzle was that he also had inherited quite a decent property portfolio of 10 properties in London, which was only geared at 40% loan to value. So clearly, this guy was absolutely onto a winner, and I was very excited to work with him. Now, with these properties being in London, as you all know, London's yields aren't all that great. It's one of the reasons we're all enjoying being here today and talking about HMOs, because the yields are a hell of a lot better. But this was a buy-to-let portfolio, relatively short yields. And I did say to him, look, from a mortgage point of view, the way in which we figure out how much we can borrow is based on the rental income, not your income. Lenders have rental calculators. The lower the yield, the harder it's going to be for us to get those funds out. So harder to get to 75%. I don't think he really listens to me. But anyway, I trotted off, young mortgage broker, to go and see if I could find this guy an awesome mortgage to help him raise the funds, basically take it from 40% to 75%. It was going to basically pull out about £500,000 for him to go up to Manchester and become the greatest property investor. In fact, his exact words to me were, "It's inevitable that I'm going to become the biggest property investor in the country." I mean, now I'll be thinking, all right, Thanos, chill out, mate. But any way I can get like a geeky reference into a talk, I'll do my very best to do so. So if you have no idea what I'm talking about, don't worry. So I trotted off and I found him a mortgage, funnily enough, because that's my job as a mortgage broker. And I went back to him. I was very, very happy. And I sat down in front of him and I said, "Guess what, mate? I've got a really good bit of news for you. We can borrow the money. I've found a lender. Even though your yields are rubbish, 3.5%, I've found you a lender." Now, as I said before, we had to go a bit specialist. And I'll be honest with you, I imagine most of you in this room, if I gave you this rate now, you'd probably bite my arm off for it. But this is back in the day, don't forget. I said, "It is going to cost a bit, mate, though. But don't forget, we're borrowing the money over here. We're going to make more over here." He said, "Go on, hit me." I said, "It's 3.5%. He went, "What?" I mean, he looked at me like I just slapped his dog. He was so disappointed in the fact that I come up to him with a 3.5% rate. His current mortgage was on about 1.9. And I said, "Well, look, mate, you're borrowing the money over here, 3.5%. You're going to be making 10% yields over here. Clearly, the difference in that is your profit margin. Surely you want to be saying, yeah, let's crack on, let's get that money out and let's go and make it put to work." Couldn't get over the fact that he was going to have to pay a 3.5% rate. Nowadays, that's probably like me coming to you and saying we've got to pay 6.5%. Understandably so, these rates do get in the way, but the purpose of this exercise was to pull money out to reinvest. And the yields were going to be greater over on this side than the cost over on this side. We actually ended up going, he said, "Well, look, it's too expensive." Another lovely bit sort of response I like to get is too expensive. My question is always, too expensive compared to what? This is what we need to do. This is the best thing for you right now. That's up there with, "Are you sure this is the cheapest rate I can get?" It's like, no, I've just been wasting my time for the last 2 days researching the market to come up with a random rate for you. No, this is the cheapest for you. So we ended up going back and actually looking at a 60% loan-to-value product, and still he wasn't happy, even though the rate was a lot lower. Now, I'll be honest with you, we never did anything with this client. I got a bit bored after a while of going back and forth with him, trying to convince him that this was probably a really good thing for him to do, and that he could go and he could build an incredible portfolio and become the greatest property investor this country has ever known. And I think he had the tools to do at least, a fair whack at it, give it a good go, especially in the kind of the residential space. I'm still friends with this guy on Facebook now, and the only thing he ever posts about is going on runs. So I'm going to make the assumption that he hasn't gone on to world domination. That's a mindset that has held a lot of people back that we work with, or have tried to work with. On the flip side, and I'm not going to say like the rich dad, poor dad thing, he's not the poor investor, just one that didn't have the right mindset. But on the flip side, and bearing in mind this guy was in his 40s, potentially even early 50s, had run a business, he should have understood the numbers. Next, we've got client number 2. Now, this guy could not have been more different from client number 1. 22 years old, straight out of university, first job, 24K a year, I think it was, that he earned, which I thought was amazing because my first job out of uni was 18 grand a year. I thought I was a pimp with that money. But that was quite a while ago. I'm a bit older than I look. And he came to me and he said, and I asked him the same question, "What's the plan? What are we trying to do here? What does your property business look like when it's finished?" And he said, "I want to build an HMO portfolio." And I said, "Okay, cool, that's fine. Why?" "Well, I've just come out of university and the quality of the accommodation that I had was really rubbish. And I'm on a mission to try and improve the quality of the student accommodation that's available to students where I went to university." Loved it. it's so important to have a really clear vision and mission that isn't just, by the way, I want to earn £10,000 cash flow a month, which is, if I had £1 for every time someone had said they want to make 10,000 net cash flow a month, I'd probably have £10,000. That is not a tangible, target, by the way. We want something a little bit more visionary, something, a mission that you can follow. So this is awesome. I had to give him the bad news that this is back, probably 7 years ago. And I was like, look, you're a first-time buyer, you're a first-time investor, you're in your first job, there ain't going to be too many, and by the way, he'd had an offer accepted on an HMO at this point, I should say, so a little bit of pressure on me. It's going to be really hard for you to get a mortgage. Lenders don't tend to like to lend to first-time buyers, first-time investors, particularly if it's on an HMO property. So he took it in his stride. He said, okay, fine, Sam. And off I trotted again to go and see if I could find him a mortgage. And success, I managed to do it. Apparently, I'm half decent at what I do. And I found him a mortgage. Now, quite the opposite of the other situation where I was quite looking forward to seeing that guy and telling him that I'd found the money for him. I was a little bit concerned about going and speaking to this person because the rate that I had to share with him on this occasion was 5.5%, which, to be honest, nowadays is actually okay. That's not too bad. But back then, it was extortionate. The base rate was at 0.1, and this lender was asking for 5.5%. Now, this was actually a bridging lender that did a kind of a mid-term, kind of 5-year product to help people that couldn't get a normal mortgage elsewhere. And I sort of calmed myself, got on the phone, presented this to him, waiting for him to tell me to piss off, quite frankly. And he didn't. It was just silence. And I thought, oh, he's passed out. But no. His next question was, so how much are the monthly payments? I was thinking, hang on a second, we're still talking. I thought that was going to be it. No. What are the monthly payments? I told him. Bearing in mind, we'd had the conversation previously about maybe buy a buy-to-let first, maybe start with something a little bit smaller. And so I told him rough rates and things like that. So he had all of that information already. The next thing he said was, okay, cool. So roughly my cash flow on this is going to be about this. I was like, yeah, cool, yeah. We're still talking. And he said, okay, so let me compare that to if I put the same deposit into a buy-to-let property and I managed to get a much better rate, but the rent was a lot lower, my cash flow is going to be about half what I would get on this HMO, even though I'm paying 5.5% on an interest rate. And I was like, yeah, it is. And that, to be honest, that was a bit of a clicking point, like a moment for me where I suddenly went, yeah, hang on a second. Yeah, this is how we should be looking at these deals. And he said something that will stay with me forever. And so this is a client teaching me stuff. He said, the interest rate on this is irrelevant. I was like, I wish every single one of my clients had that mentality. It would make my life a hell of a lot easier. But we went ahead with the deal. He bought the property. And he now has a very nice portfolio of HMO properties that are done to an insane spec that helps a lot of people that have since gone to the university that he went to. And he has been ultra successful on the back of that. So if you compare that to that, there's a clear difference, isn't there, between the two? And what I'm hoping is that but when you leave today, that hopefully I've been able to, by sharing those stories with you, you can ask yourself the question, was I or have I ever been in camp number one, where I've got a little bit hung up by the interest rate? Maybe I haven't done a deal because how much it's going to cost me to borrow the money has really put me off. And are you now potentially going to convert into somebody with this mindset, the one where we're focusing on what the really important numbers are, which is what's the cash flow and how is it going to allow you to then project forward and actually succeed in achieving what you want your property business to look like when it's done. So hopefully that's been really useful. Thanks very much for sitting in the heat and listening to me. Enjoy the rest of your day. And again, thanks very much for listening for me.